again. Raise your hand again if you have done a Socratic seminar. I thought somebody, so 2 and 3, 4, okay, some of you have. Why didn't you raise your hand the first time? I remember you did. So basically a Socratic seminar is kind of like a debate in that you are given some sort of topic and you discuss it back and forth, talking about different viewpoints. The difference is with a Socratic seminar, it's not meant to be like targeted or confrontational in any way. It's really just a chance for you to listen to somebody else's opinions and then reflect on them and then kind of respond to them, and in a way your opinions kind of shape and mold based on what everybody else has said. It's based on philosopher Socrates and how he kind of liked to teach his students. He thought, you know, better than me giving you the answer, why don't you find the answer yourself? And so he would just, whenever you ask a question, he would ask one back. And then that way it would get you thinking a little bit more, and then you could ask another one, and he would take you another step and another step further. So that's kind of how these are set up. The one that we're doing today is on cyber schooling, which is kind of a big issue right now for us as teachers and for you as students, especially as you move into college where there are a lot of online courses offered and things, and trying to figure out how to, I don't know, navigate through all the waters of traditional versus online schooling. Second of all, the way they're set up, so somebody can begin, whoever really wants to, and then after that, we've done some research and we've thought of some things that we're interested in, some questions that have popped up in our mind already based on the text that I've given everybody to read. So you have one common text. Ours was a video from PBS about cyber schooling. And so we've already generated some questions on that, and then we'll generate some more as we hear what people say. The only stipulation is whatever comment you make, it has to end in a question. So you address somebody else's question, you respond with whatever your ideas are, and then you give another question back to the crowd or back to the audience so that they can think about it and respond again. So today, for the first like 20 minutes or so, you guys are just watching, kind of seeing how this works, the etiquette and the setup for things about how to conduct one of these so that your opinion is heard and so is everybody else's. And then if any of you feel like you're really ambitious and have something you'd like to say yourself, there's a hot seat for you to jump into too, and you can come in and join our conversation, respond to something that we're saying, and ask something back. So, does that sound good?
Anything else that you wanted to add?
It really is just a dialogue. That's really the key. You want to keep going. It's like you said, it's not a debate.
Right.
It's a dialogue, conversation in the form of questions. There should never be a sentence. And the ways you'll learn very quickly to weasel in the statements in the form of questions. But that's really the essence of it. You just want to always dialogue with each other. The idea is that you learn more by asking questions than being told something.
So really, as long as you're kind of, taking whatever somebody said and thinking about it and then responding with another avenue or another way or another perspective, you're doing what you're supposed to. We're doing this in public speaking because it's not always about, talking in front of an audience and your audience just listening. 99% of the time, when you're speaking in public, you're having a conversation with somebody, be it in an interview or in your everyday life. So that's this is the practical form of public speaking. And so it's nice to know how to do it sounding very academic and intelligent and kind of comprehensive about whatever you're talking about.
And I will say too that just adding in that it's only in the form of questions, that makes it a little bit of a higher level. It is more challenging, so that aspect is different as well.
Which you'll find sometimes we're not that good at either. But we weasel it in.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think if I recall correctly, my original question was, is cyber schooling a viable alternative to traditional education? So that's kind of where we started. Does anybody feel like they want to begin?
I will say, I guess as teachers, we obviously probably have very strong opinions on the topic. I do think it is a viable education, but don't you think it's only viable for a certain select group of students?
I agree with that, especially Mrs. Weincoop and I have a similar background in elementary education, and I really look at that as it's being offered K to 12. How can a kindergartner sit in front of a computer and learn all of the skills that they're required to learn in kindergarten, where it's not just learning math and English and reading, it's also learning the social skills and how to interact within a group. So how does cyber school address that need?
It's interesting. That was my immediate reaction whenever I looked into all this information. And then I found a 2010 study done by a university in Colorado. And they just kind of compared standardized testing scores, not looking at the social skills of things, but just math, reading, writing. And surprisingly, elementary students who are cyber schooled are closer to traditional schooling scores than in higher levels where there are larger gaps between them. So I in some ways I wonder, what is it, is traditional school and at the elementary level really specifically for social learning then, since it seems like they can get that other stuff at home?
Well, studies show that the primary focus is to get a foundation on the elementary level, but it's really the socialization skills that are more focused on at the elementary level. Wouldn't you ladies that taught elementary agree?
I do think that that's a huge aspect of it, especially since last year I taught preschoolers, and yes, it's very social. How do you act in certain situations? How do you conduct yourself within a classroom? Even simple things such as how do you stand in line, or how do you let someone know that you need to leave the room to go to the restroom? So yes, I definitely think those skills are core to the elementary and the early childhood education. But I wonder too about the different type of learning styles and how those elementary students can sit in front of the computer and learn everything. I know that there's fantastic programs so they can have manipulatives on the computer, but some students don't learn that way. Some students need something in front of them, or they need to be up and moving. And how can cyber school do that? How can it appeal to those other learning styles?
Well, I guess I'll take it back to Mrs. Weinkoop, who had said that it works for certain students, and we got off on who it didn't work for very quickly. So I'd be curious to who you thought it would work for.
Well, I think it would work, looking at that video. It seemed to be working for the original mother and her children who were there, at least from the way they talked, but she made the point that she is there as a support and a facilitator. And wouldn't you agree that not every parent who puts their child in cyber school is going to act in that same manner?
I would also further maintain that most parents would not necessarily have a background in the variety of disciplines. So even if they were there, they would not be very effective in all areas of education. Wouldn't you agree?
I would agree. So are you saying that, referring back to my original question, that it works for, you think it would probably work for students who have the support at home of the parents, but also that parent needs to be well-versed or practiced in education?
Yeah, but see, I respectfully disagree that it does not work even if you had the support of that individual parent, primarily because they don't necessarily have the background in physics or social studies. And so they may be helpful in one, they cannot possibly be helpful in all the totality of what each child needs to successfully learn his education in the 21st century. Wouldn't you agree with that?
But isn't that why there's a teacher in the cyber school who is?
But as a person that worked in a cyber school setting, the teacher, in my humble opinion, is not the best of an interactive personality, and that's partly why they hide behind a computer screen. And as a result, they cannot provide that individual, differentiated, which is what Ms. Rogers was referring to, educational needs. It's a one-size-all-fit mentality. And as educators, I think you'd all agree with me, would you not, that it does not work?
And furthermore, within the video, they also said that it was, the statistic they gave was approximately 60% of their classes do not have a live instructor. So you're not getting that formative, the summative assessment, you're not getting that information right back to you, you're not getting your feedback. And also then, if you have a classroom that's not set up with a live teacher and someone's just logging on at any time, how can they guarantee that it's the student that's doing the work? How do they know that it's little Johnny who's in 5th grade sitting down to do his social studies and not his older brother or his mom or her grandma or grandpa or uncle? How do they know?
Well, at this point, can we even guarantee that in a traditional setting?
Well,
How do we know that parents are
but work
doing
is done in the
that?
classroom, you can tell.
Right. If you can take a look, I think
Right.
easily enough. Yeah, there you go. I think you could tell very quickly if a student wrote a 5-page essay that is well beyond what you have seen within the parameters of the classroom all of a sudden. So I think as educators, we have a pretty good gut on what is real and what is fake. So I would concur that, yes, you have to watch as a teacher in the classroom. You would still know it when you see it, to quote a former Supreme Court Chief Justice. Would you not?
There was what you said about, well, both of you said about the teacher being there. And one thing, I came across something on the New York Times that was kind of outlining different parts of cyber schooling. And one note that it made was there are, like the classrooms where there are live teachers, a lot of them have 100 to 200 students in them.
Oh, yeah.
And I think I looked at that originally like as both a student and as a teacher thinking, how is that manageable? One of the main things that people tout about cyber schooling, especially like with that mother, is kind of like you practically have a one-on-one teacher. Like, and who doesn't learn better whenever the teacher's right there with you? But with 100 to 200 students, how are we letting that happen in education? How are we letting just basically a sea of students listen
Well,
to?
the short answer is that the law does not quantify how many a cyber teacher is allowed to or should be allowed to teach, and therefore they can make it whatever they want until the law catches up with that. But that is why so many kids fall through the cracks, is it not?
Yeah, and I think that also it was very evident through that video with them talking with the guy who was the head of the PA cyber school. I mean, yes, he said, oh, we're not focused on profit, even though you saw the big profit that they made. So I feel like I mean, I can't say for all, but I would assume that most probably just want to get kids through so that they can get more money, and they don't really care about the class size limit.
And once they have
Right.
the money, they do not need to worry about a graduation rate either.
Mhm.
So then they own the money at that point. So it is a for-profit situation. And since we're talking about profit, I used Bellefonte High School. For every one of our students that leaves us in this brick and mortar environment, it costs this school district $8,000 to $9,000 per kid to go to PA Cyber. Is that not an expense that does a detriment of the other students that are left behind?
Absolutely, and I actually just read the district's proposed budget for next year, and it said they're estimating $1.6 million to go to cyber school costs for kids that should be attending here. So what's making those kids leave?
I almost think it's more interesting too that a lot of the students that do leave to go to cyber school don't stay there. They come back to the regular education setting. So something that's happening in cyber school must not be working for them. So I wonder if it were possible to identify what isn't working, if we could possibly not fix the situation, but perhaps improve it.
But I don't think there's an incentive for the for-profit companies to try to improve it, because they already got their money.
Absolutely.
From our perspective, what we have found is that the only kid that does well at it has to be self-motivated, that they could both log on and set a set schedule, and usually it's a higher thinking student, perhaps a gifted student, that is trying to accelerate more than a student that is just trying to learn the basics to survive. And that is what our studies have shown as to who is going to be more likely to be successful within.
I agree with that completely, but
Any question? And
Sorry,
yeah.
go ahead.
And therefore, I think that might be, is it not, one of the groups that may benefit from a cyber type setting. But
Absolutely.
that would be an acceleration, not an education. And that's the distinction that maybe people don't draw.
Absolutely, that's exactly the group of students who I had in my mind when I asked myself that question. That's really the only type of student that I would think would succeed in that, right?
Well, it's the only one that I have found that has been successful. I would further maintain, to flip the question, is people with special needs are particularly vulnerable to not do well on a cyber setting. The study shows that these kids, they don't do appropriate adaptations, probably because, again, they're not physically present to make them, and as a result, we're now losing another segment of our populations to be able to survive in this 21st century economy. Is it not a huge waste of time and talent?
On sort of the same level as far as who's successful, I found it interesting in that same New York Times article, it said Florida requires all of its students to take at least one online course in order to graduate, because they're trying to prepare them for college, where a lot of programs are both traditional and online, and there's a combination of it, and they see it as a skill that we need to prepare them for. And so, but I wonder, is there a way that we could do that in this setting rather than, you know, leave it all up to their own? Is that maybe too much independence, or is that too gray area for us to be able to monitor it?
Well, before you even get into whether it's a too grave an area to monitor, I think one has to analyze what the motivation was of that Florida law. When you look at who gave the campaign donations, to those legislators and that governor to pass the law, it says what the real motivation was it gave a huge sum of money to campaign contributors for those charter schools. That's what it was. The true motivation, was it not?
Does education always come back to politics? That would also be a
That'd
good
be a whole
overarching
other
question
discussion.
for another
Whole other
seminar.
question, is it not?
Yeah, and going off what you said, Mrs. Crossan, I apologize. One of the questions I have when I was thinking about it, on the other side of the coin, when we talk about it being a viable education, is don't you think it does make kids a little bit more tech savvy who go to cyber school, or do you think, no? What's your opinion on that?
No, I do not. I think my 7-year-old son can take apart the Wii, can do the Xbox much better than I, regardless of whether he ever went to a cyber academy of any type. And I think that generation and this generation around us is much better than we'll ever be, regardless of what school they went to. Would you not agree, from other areas that they're involved in technology?
I wonder if being involved, like the situation within Florida, with being involved in an online class but still being in a classroom setting, which honestly, isn't that what our EPD and MPD classes are right now? They're going towards that. They're having an online class, but there's still a teacher in the room with them to provide the supports. So we're kind of there, we're on the cusp of that. But I wonder if having that online situation actually can extend those students, and maybe not necessarily their tech savviness, but perhaps making them more critical readers of what they're finding online or research that they're doing for that class. One class that I had in my teacher preparation program was a face-to-face class. However, that teacher also had a completely virtual classroom set up. So we had a Blackboard site that had extra materials that we were required to go on and do there as well. So not only did we have assignments within the classroom, we also had assignments online. I will say that was my first experience of having an online class, but I then proceeded to have my master's degree as an online class. So I think that having that situation where I was meeting face-to-face and online, I think that did prepare me actually to be a better online learner. But having done a program, I will say you have to be motivated and you have to have that drive within yourself to do that. So perhaps someday that might be something we can get to, but then again, you also have to look at the costs and really wonder how are we helping the students with that.
I think your last statement/question is really the key, because we may be on the cusp, but I'd be questioning the value of going over the precipice. Because if I've got a computer, I got a camera like that, and I can see the screen of another 30 kids from that school, another 30 kids over there, how effective will I actually be able to reach all of that? And us as educators, should we not be very cautious of allowing ourselves to be in a position where you have 100 kids and you're in charge of them all? I think there's huge liabilities there.
Do you think a lot of people tout cyber schooling as being a way that you can pace yourself and you move faster on things that you're good at, you move slower on things where you need more time, and so it's really an individualized instruction, which we've kind of said, yes it is, no it's not. But then there are also programs where your schooling is online, but you get together to do like a science lab, or you get together to go on a field trip or something. Would that be like some perfect scenario? Is if we can find a way to make social skills intermixed with at your own pace learning, is that perfect education?
I think education is more than knowledge, and as a result, I think you'll be losing more than you'll be gaining in the long run. And I'd further maintain that I think one has to analyze what the motivation of people are to want to move towards a cyber school, or take founding from you guys to move to a cyber school. And I think once you analyze the motivation, I think that the unspoken consent is that they want to destroy that what exists, but they're not sure what to put in its place. Because would you not agree it's easier to destroy than to rebuild?
Absolutely. And I think a good way to possibly put this seminar to an end is to think about, from all the comments that you said, I would think that we're in the consensus that no, it's not a viable education. Cyber school is not a viable education. So as educators, as teachers, what can we do to help stop people going to cyber school? Like, what are some ways that we could take action against it if we don't feel it's viable? And we wouldn't obviously want our own children going, let alone the students that we work with. So what can we as teachers do?
I think people need to be aware of what the motivation is for sending. I think they need to be aware of the cost-benefit analysis that'll hurt everybody in the long run as a society and for the short term for a school. I think education of that fact make a difference. But I think we need to challenge our students more within the environment that already exists. And then there would not perhaps be as much of a motivation to move on, in my opinion. I don't know where you stand on that sentence.
I do completely. I think if we're as effective as we possibly can be in the classroom, that we're not going to be having a lot of our students being sent to cyber school. If we can effectively manage our classroom as far as the classroom management aspect goes, because I feel that could be a reason why a lot of kids go to cyber school, because they can't handle, you know, the environment within the classroom as far as behaviors go. So I think if we can effectively have very good classroom management and just be extremely good teachers who really care about, you know, the qualities and the abilities of each individual child, then we're not going to see those kids leaving to go elsewhere, because the parents are going to be happy with them here, the students are going to be happy here, and in the end, isn't that what we all want?
I agree, I think a lot of it has to do with that individualized part. We have to find a way that, you know, we have that common bond of Belmont High School, and that, you know, we're all red and white and this is what we are. But also mix that with a unique experience for every student, so that they leave feeling like they got what they needed out of it. And that's, I think, just a delicate balance that will probably always be